I think I'm an introvert who got converted to an extrovert by necessity. I love the solitude. I find that I can think better. In times of solitude, I think I can pray better. And I just feel like I notice more things. I can become aware of more things around me when I am quiet.
You know, if you know a little bit about me, I'm a very extrovert guy, but I do need my quiet time. So I'm kind of a hybrid. And so sometimes I need to recharge. And there is something, and it's mentioned all throughout the Bible, like when you go to the top of the mountain. And I love the mountain myself. So every time I go and I have my quiet time to really be in contact with God and nature, something really, really special happens every time. So, you know, I actually enjoy the solitude when you are connected to God.
I like solitude and silence because I'm an introvert, you know, so I kind of get energized by that kind of experience. But the discipline or the practice of solitude is an entirely different thing, because what happens there is I am oftentimes confronted with what's really going on inside of me. When I slow everything down and I'm simply still and alone and quiet with God, I begin to understand more what's going on inside of me, and that then gives me an opportunity to bring those things to God. And so it's in solitude and silence really that I can calibrate my inner life, my inner world with God and what He's doing in my life.
If there were ever a set of spiritual disciplines designed for the introverts and those who rely on time alone to be recharged, it would be that of solitude and silence. These practices allow us to quiet our minds, refocus our attention, and give us rest. And while our culture might make us slaves to the noise and need of the daily grind, it is in taking time to find freedom from these things that we can better face them and build a more resilient faith. But here's the thing, in silence and solitude, you can have silence without solitude. You can have solitude without silence, and you can also be alone and be quiet without engaging God in the process. Now, last week we talked about the purpose of fasting, and it isn't to simply go without food. It's setting aside one of the most normal aspects of our daily lives for the purpose of seeking and knowing God in a deeper way. Silence and solitude work the same way. Being alone or quiet may not be a normal thing for us, but when we set aside the norm for a time, we can better engage with God and build a more resilient faith in Him. You see, even Jesus spent time alone. In Matthew 4:1, we learn that God's Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness by Himself. And there are many places in the Gospels where we see that Jesus withdrew from the people to spend time alone and pray. Luke 5:15 through 16 tells us, crowds of people came to hear Him and to be healed of their sickness, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now think about that. Jesus had a more important purpose than anyone who has ever lived, and He only had a few years to accomplish His purpose. His earthly ministry didn't begin until He was about 30 years old, and when He was around 33, He died on the cross. During those few years, people demanded His attention. If anyone in this world could ever say, I can't slow down right now, I'm slammed, it was Jesus. But He didn't do that. He practiced solitude. His relationship with His Father was the most important.
I had an experience exercising, being in silent for 5 days actually. There's a place in San Juan Capistrano where it's designed to be by yourself, no cell phone, no internet, nothing. And you just concentrate being in the Word and being with God and just listen, hear, and obey.
The older I get, the more I enjoy solitude and silence. I think there's something special about a space that you've reserved that's uninterrupted, where you can just sit and actually think about, hey, what am I thinking about? What have I gone through the day? And just be able to process without any external stimuli getting in the way.
I think solitude and silence can be very difficult for a lot of us. I've been to church camps where we had to go out and sit for an hour. And it's difficult. You know, most people end up falling asleep, but it's difficult having solitude and silence, and using that as a time to speak to God and think about God and His nature. It can be easier, you know, when you're out in some beautiful location, you know, in the mountains or your favorite, whatever really makes you comfortable. But solitude and silence is difficult.
Silence and solitude, I really kind of fight for. You know, I realize that I need it. You know, if Jesus went away to pray by Himself, how much more do I need that as an imperfect follower of Him? So I have really grown in seeking solitude and silence. I do think like this stage of toddlerhood is interesting, of parenting hope. I will have pockets. If I really seek solitude and silence, it will be early morning, late night generally, because she's not fully in school. And I seek to, you know, I have to, with intention, schedule things like I would care for a friend, or I have to with intention, schedule things so that they happen. And so I'm learning that with a toddler in new ways.
On this subject of silence and solitude, one author wrote, "God works in ways that are hidden, but nevertheless vital to life. But too often we make excuses for our inability to get away and view the fact that we have maxed out our vacation time as a badge of honor. If we truly call ourselves Christ followers, then we would see that following Christ means that living our lives would reflect the practices He put into place. These two practices in and of themselves are very connected. However, we must first come to understand and experience the transforming power of silence if we are to know solitude. Silence, true silence, is very rare in our world, and many find it uncomfortable. However, when you think about who you can sit in silence with and have it not be awkward, you would probably only be able to list those that you are closest to. Now, when I was young and dating my husband, we filled every moment with noise, whether it be music, TV, or talking. But now, after 21 years of marriage, we enjoy just sitting in silence and being in each other's presence. It might seem weird to some, but there is something quite settling about when you can simply enjoy someone's presence without anything else. I think this is the type of relationship that God wants with each of us, when we are settled enough to just sit together. A friend of mine likes to call this a practice of inaccessibility, when you make yourself inaccessible to everything and everyone else so that you can be settled and accessible to God. Now, I know some of you are thinking, I can't even find 5 minutes of silence to use the restroom. How can I build time in my life to experience solitude and silence with God? Well, a couple of things that might help you are to first make a plan for it, setting aside time and a place. Then let those in your life know that you are going to be spending time with God in silence and solitude so they don't disturb you. Also, turn off any devices that you might have as a distraction to you, and remember that if at first you don't succeed, try again. Now, I can't wait to see how God will use your time this week as you engage with Him through silence and solitude to build that resilient faith in your life.